Hi, you're listening to It Happened to Me, a rare disease and medical challenges podcast. The mission of our podcast is to support you, our listeners, and to create community as you confront the toughest challenges in life. All of us will experience health hardships. The real question is how we adapt. That's the focus of It Happened to Me, which wants to help you overcome limitations and live a full and satisfying life. Drawing on their own health challenges, co-hosts Kathy Gildenhorn and Beth Glassman interview guests who share stories and research to help you succeed in the face of difficult health obstacles. It happened to me. I'm not alone, and neither are you.
Today, we're honored to be joined by two incredible patient advocates and changemakers in the sickle cell disease community, Wunmi Bakare and Dima Hendricks, both of whom are living with sickle cell disease and have used their powerful voices to advocate for better care, awareness, and access to emerging treatments.
Wunmi and Dima are also the dynamic co-hosts of Through the Genes, podcast they launched on World Sickle Cell Day, which is June 18th, 2024. The show gives a raw, thoughtful, and educational look into gene therapies and other innovative treatments for sickle cell disease, sharing stories from both patients and experts. And we're thrilled to be on the same science podcast network, Gene Pool Media, and can't wait for the launch for second season again on June 18th. Now, in today's conversation, we will hear about both of their personal experiences with sickle cell disease, their perspectives on curative treatments, and why patient-centered storytelling is so crucial in rare and chronic diseases.
Thank you both for being on It Happened to Me today. Dima, for those who may not know, what is sickle cell disease?
I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for allowing us to be on the show. It's an honor to be here. To answer your question, sickle cell disease is an inherited blood disorder that primarily affects individuals of the Mediterranean, African, and Middle Eastern descent. So what happens with this blood disorder, individuals who have it present with sickle-shaped blood cells. Now, your blood cells are round like a donut, and my blood cells are shaped like sickles or like a banana, if you will. And so when my blood cells go through my veins and any arteries, tissue, organs, they're hard and sticky, and it creates blockage. And sometimes it eliminates oxygen from flowing from one part of the body to the next. So because of that, we have many complications, sometimes organ failure, blockage in body parts. So sometimes I have like issues with my lungs. But the hallmark of sickle cell disease, I would say, is pain.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
When you say, can I ask you, how would you describe that pain so our audience can really understand what it is that you feel?
Oh.
You know, we talk about pain, but this is excruciating, apparently.
This is excruciating pain. I will just say, when I have experienced a 10 out of 10 crisis, it's like, so I gave birth to two children. My first child he was born naturally, and my second child,
you know pain.
Yeah, so I know pain.
You know pain.
My first child was natural. My second child was a cesarean. And so I would say I rather give birth 10 more.
Oh my goodness. Well, that is a comparison that I think at least our women in the audience will understand.
Will understand, absolutely.
Yes, my goodness.
That's the hallmark of sickle cell disease. I've had men who said that they were shot. I have sickle cell, and they said they were shot, and they said they'd rather get shot.
Oh my goodness.
It's a very complicated. And the thing is, I'll be in pain, and I can present just as I'm presenting right now. And
this calm and measured and
calm and measured to a point, because my pain threshold is, because I've lived with sickle cell all of my life, able to present and able to put on a facade. And
Pain threshold is higher than it was initially.
so yeah, something I had to get used to, because when I was born with it, and as a baby feeling that pain, I was told I
Oh,
scream and cry a lot as a baby.
yes.
And now,
Oh,
I'm a working mother to I can't go out and present and scream and cry, so I gotta like
no.
suck it up
You have to manage.
and manage the
Yeah.
pain. So yeah, it's a
Wow.
very difficult, tricky disease.
It's off to you. That's quite a story. Now, Wunmi, can you take us back to the early days of your journey with sickle cell disease? What do you wish people better understood about living with this condition day to day?
So,
Is the
uh,
pain that Dima's been talking about? What do you wish people thought about and understood?
for me, my sickle cell journey started relatively young. I was diagnosed at 18 months.
My
Wow.
goodness.
Yes, I had my first surgery when I was 7 years old, and it was bilateral arm surgery. So you can imagine, being 7 years old, your peers are in school and you're being taken out of school and in the hospital for 3 months. Salmonella infection that led to bone damage in both arms. So sickle cell is one of those rare diseases that is significantly impactful, right? What I wish people know is I wish they were cognizant of the fact that your blood is everywhere. So if you
Yes.
think of that context, sickle
Good
cell
point. Yes.
does not manifest in the way that other diseases that are like organ focused manifest.
Right. Right.
Oh,
So
you're
this is a full body
It's a
experience.
full body experience. You can have a crisis in your brain. You can have a crisis in your fingers, in your genitals, in your bones, in your organs. And so because of how jarring
Oh,
the experience of living with sickle cell disease is, for many of us sickle cell warriors, just like Dima mentioned, we're masking a lot, which is putting on a brave face while our body is going through a really difficult transitionary period, because those sickled red blood cells, they clog and they block blood flow. And if you think of where blood flows, it flows through your blood vessels, it also goes through your bone. And so for a lot of sickle cell patients, we experience something called avascular necrosis, which in layman's terms, that just means the death to the bone. So for me, for example,
Wow.
yes, if you look at my hip through an x-ray, you'll see right at the top of the hip bone, my pelvic bone, you'll see a lot of holes. And that's because over the course of having sickle cell disease, the blocked blood flow led to not enough blood supply in the bone area, that now it's chipped because of that friction between my hip and the top of my femur kind of rubbing together,
Right.
the loss of bone. And so I have that in my shoulders and my pelvic bone as well. So for a lot of sickle cell patients, by the time you are between your teens to your late 40s, you're requiring a hip replacement.
my goodness.
We
I
know
had no idea.
Yes.
I had absolutely no idea.
And are there any levels or stages of sickle cell, or once you're diagnosed, it's 100%?
So because of their different genotypes of sickle cell disease, it manifests differently. I was born with HBSS, which is the most severe type. And so for me, it was never a conversation of my pain was tolerable and then it peaked. It always
Yeah.
Yeah, with every vaso-occlusive crisis. But if you have sickle cell, which is the SC type, for those patients, they don't have frequent pain episodes. But when they do, it could be significantly detrimental, because it then is a very high peak, challenging, occlusive crisis to manage. So it varies, but in the diagnosis that Dima and I share, which is HBSS, ours is just the most severe type.
I am just amazed. So I am looking at both of you. You are clearly both young, very attractive women for our audience. And to have already significant bone damage at such a young age is really, I am so sorry that this has happened at such a young age. You don't really expect that. You expect arthritis to hit someone in their 80s, and you're experiencing bone loss at such a young age. And I had no idea. Had no idea. So I want to ask you something about your interactions with your doctors, and whether there's this term that's being used today, gaslighting. And I think we all sort of know that term, and where doctors say things that they really know not to be true, which is, I think, it's obviously so unfortunate. But I wonder if you've had the experience where, taking the line from our podcast, "It happened to me," that maybe some good things have come about. Can you talk about these good experiences where maybe you've received care or kindness that was positive?
I could speak to that because I have a fantastic care team now.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
My team, I'm blessed. I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, where
Great
medicine,
healthcare.
Yeah.
great healthcare here. But when I was born, the doctor who diagnosed me was my doctor until I was like 35. I had absolutely amazing care. She was with me from when I lost my mother. She for me. She became like a second mom to me.
Beautiful.
When other doctors, because she was the training hematologist at the hospital at the time, when other doctors presented as if they were gaslighting or as if they were trying to put me in a bubble or not deny medicine, she would correct them in front of me. And say,
Beautiful.
no, no, this is a sickle cell warrior. And then what beautiful thing that she did was, if I was like getting good grades in school, or if I was like in a pageant or something, or if I was doing something fantastic, she would present that first to the
Oh,
other and say, "This is Dima. She did A, B, C, and D, and F, And so
She was a mom.
yeah, so she was able to have the doctors let their guard down,
that's
and
wonderful.
able to. So she's still, I think she's still around. She's this
But she presented you as a person,
as a
not a
Yeah.
disease.
not
You
a
weren't a
disease.
disease, you were a person. And
Yes.
isn't that so wonderful?
And it's beautiful to have people like that.
So,
Absolutely.
ladies, both of you suffer with a disease that what we would term as invisible. People can't see it. And there are other diseases like that. And I wonder if you can speak to the isolation that no one knows that you're suffering, and you may have a smile on your face, but you don't feel good. How do you deal with that?
I think for me, from the moment I had an understanding of what sickle cell was when I felt the isolation. And I say that because I grew up in a country, Lagos, Nigeria, that even though we have the highest patient population in the world, with 1 in 4 living with sickle cell trait, it's
Wow.
highly stigmatized, demonized, weaponized disease. So it's classified as a social stigma. And our cultural beliefs are one where you don't air your dirty laundry. And sickle cell is airing the family's, dirty laundry. And so for me, I grew up where I was always conscious of never letting the people that
I see.
were in the classroom with me, even
Oh,
family, I didn't let them know I had sickle cell disease because I didn't want to be othered. When you live with an invisible disability, there's something that happens. When people get to finally hear your truth, there is this look of sympathy. And I think anyone living with a chronic illness that can't be seen with the eye, like blindness,
mm,
is very cognizant of the fact that I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I'm empowered.
uh-huh.
I live and exist as an individual. I do all the same things you do. It just maybe takes me a little longer. But you don't ever want to feel like a broken egg that people are sheltering or putting in a bubble. And so for me, even though there were moments over the course of my life where I did feel significantly isolated, I felt like one of one. I felt like in my family of loved ones and friends, I was quite misunderstood. Now, working in patient advocacy, I'm incredibly blessed to now have what I call my sickle family, people who know this journey and they can see me and see all of me. That's exciting. That's exciting to experience because I
It's
think
incredible support.
Yes, I'm glad you found your people.
I
Yes,
Yes.
definitely found my tribe.
So
yes,
important. So important.
very.
Now, Dima, a major part of your career is your advocacy work. But before becoming a public voice, how did you personally navigate the emotional and the physical toll of sickle cell? And what helped you keep going during the hardest times?
That's a great question. Honestly, I'm still working through it. I think
Mhm.
before, because I was born with it, diagnosed at 6 months,
Wow.
just had to learn how to just deal with it and cope.
Hmm.
Kids will make fun of me, call me all types of names, and
I can't
Oh,
believe this.
oh yeah,
really?
that's
Are other
regular.
children or
Other
okay.
children. Oh, and adults too.
Oh,
Adults too?
Adults too.
Wow.
oh.
So I
And
think
did they realize how prone the Black community is to this disease?
it was just a lack of education. If you see someone
Mhm.
presenting as a crying infant or a
Yes.
child that's always sick and not allowing yourself to be educated or informed, of
Mhm.
course, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to create bias or, just a judgment. And so that I believe that was happening, especially I'm an 80s baby. Back then, mental health wasn't a thing. You just had to, I was a latchkey kid. You just had to go and just do your thing and survive.
Mm.
So I had that mentality up until recently when I discovered like Pandora's box opened and a floodgate of emotions has just been pouring out for the past couple of years now.
Mhm.
I'm discovering how really sensitive I am and vulnerable I am. And I'm like, whoa, this disease has really done a number on me.
It's almost as if you wouldn't let yourself recognize or feel it until now.
I wasn't allowed to feel. Felt even in my having a sickle cell crisis. After my mom passed, I grew up in foster homes. So it was almost like
Oh my goodness.
How did the foster moms deal with sickle cell?
it depends on the foster parent. One foster parent was like, "Oh, you're faking." It just depended on the person and how
Yeah.
educated or informed they were.
Right.
Or a survivor.
I'm at the place in my life right now. I just don't want to be a survivor. I want to thrive.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think
You
that's
go,
right.
girl. You
All
go.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
that's wonderful. That's
Now,
really great.
Dima, you're known for blending advocacy with pageantry and public speaking. How do you maintain your identity outside of being a patient, especially when sickle cell takes up so much space?
This is another great question because for so long I've been trying to run away from sickle cell. I always wanted to be the normal kid or the normal person. And I would use education as my way out and
Mhm.
excelled in those things to be like, okay, I'm more than my sickle cell. I'm more than my pain.
Yes.
I'm this, I'm great, I'm excellent, I'm awesome, I'm amazing. And so that's how it began. And right now I'm in this space where I'm embracing the fact that I have sickle cell, and it's the thing that has made me who I am. It has made me.
That's wonderful. And it seems like what you've done is turn it around. So your goal isn't, making yourself normal. Your goal is taking what you have in life and educating and advocating and really making a difference in the world.
Exactly, exactly.
That's beautiful.
So I started the organization through the pain because I wanted a like an adjective or something descriptive and happy in front of the word through the pain. Like, yes, we're having pain and we're going through it. But what are we doing? I use words. I say I'm dancing through the pain. I'm thriving, I'm vibrant through the pain. So I wanted other people to be a part of this movement. Don't I just feel like just sitting in it and embracing the painful part of our lives this diminishes what God has actually put in us.
Well, you
And
guys are both so inspirational.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
really true.
It's so
Really true.
amazing. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
So this really leads us to gene therapy and treatments. And I'm listening to you, and I am thinking that I would be in fear of pain. I would be in fear of having a horrible attack somewhere in my body, and I would want therapy. So I want to ask you, how did you feel about CRISPR when this came out, and what were your thoughts about the possibility of therapy and the side effects?
I think for me, I will be completely transparent and honest. The healthcare system and African American communities don't have the best relationship because our trust has been significantly broken. So when my providers never brought up the conversation around transformative therapies for sickle cell disease. I did that.
Really?
on my own.
Really? Why?
That it was a
Wow.
yeah. And keep in mind, I was receiving health care. I was in the hospital over a course of 24 months, literally.
Oh my gosh.
The shortest amount of time I spent at home was maybe 5 days, and then I was back in the hospital, and that continued for 24 months. So for me, I got to a place of, I will say, I don't want to use the word depression, but I was really in a broken place. And I remember saying to God, I don't want to live past the age of 30. Sickle cell is going to be part of my identity and my life. And I always share the story that like a week to my 30th birthday is when I found out my brother was a match for me. Transplant has been a blessing and it's significantly changed the trajectory of my quality of life.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
Oh, I'm so thrilled for you.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, but gene therapy is so new. It's
Yes.
so new. And the thing with new therapies is anyone would be nervous because
Yes.
you're concerned of like 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line. What is this going to look like? Gene therapy works because your cells are modified and then they're put back in you. And for me, because I was like a science buff, I know that everything has a cause and effect. If
Yes.
you splice the genome and you turn off or turn on something, could be leading to a domino effect of changing something that shouldn't have been done in the first place. And so for me, there was a lot of hesitancy around gene therapy. But now working in the cell and gene therapy space, at the heart of patients wanting these new therapies, a better quality of life. No one wants to live their life shrouded by pain. Pain that you can't necessarily say this is going to end by certain age. Instead, as we age with sickle cell gets progressively worse. And so for these novel therapies, my advice to families, caregivers are always like, do your research. Know enough to be informed, but don't endeavor to know too much where you're completely guarded and too scared. But I think we need to manage realistic expectations from patients. And so I always say, do your research, but more importantly, someone who's gone through it.
Right.
So you're sort of speaking about the Henrietta Lacks situation, right? That's what you're referring to?
In terms of the distrust.
The distrust of the medical community. But I hope that young people, that was a lifetime ago. It was eons ago. And that I hope that there's more of an understanding that the medical community is here to help. And I hope that is the truth, that gene therapy is there to provide relief from the pain. But before any sort of procedure, I think you do this balancing of the pros and cons, right? Isn't that what you do before deciding to embark on something that's new?
Yes.
But at this point, you have so much to lose if you don't try. I mean, you're talking about your bone health and excruciating pain, that taking that leap is so absolutely necessary.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, grateful if
Yes.
me would I do it all over again? I say absolutely yes. But I did, and I made it from an informed decision. I weighed out the risks and the benefits, protocols, and I did what was best for me.
Yes. And that's
the way
what
it should be.
a prudent patient should do. But I am sorry to hear that treatments weren't raised. I mean, that makes me so sad.
Yes, so sad.
And
sad.
No, unlike Wunmi, for me, I made the decision to move forward in that process as well. I did not weigh risks and benefits because there was a desperation.
Yes, I understand.
I get that.
A little
I
bit
get
of
that.
pure. It was like dangling a carrot.
Yes.
Once I heard the word, or even being close to a cure, immediately put myself in the study. It didn't work out, but a lot of patients have that desperation mentality in mind.
We interviewed someone who actually had pancreatic cancer, and she was in a clinical study. And actually, as a result of her study, that became the state of the art. that I think sometimes there's an apprehension about being in a study, but they can be extraordinarily helpful. But for these studies, we wouldn't move forward.
Now, for both of you, what misconceptions or myths about sickle cell disease would you like to clear up for our audience?
For me, it would be the generalization of it being a Black disease. There's people with blonde hair, blue eyes that have sickle cell disease. And because of the misconception that it predominantly affects just people of African descent, my blue-eyed, blonde hair folks that have sickle cell disease aren't being treated as well either.
Wow. That is a misconception.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And Wunmi, what about you?
So for me, I think the one misconception that I hope and pray that we get to outlive is that because it's a Black disease, it's not a global health issue. So in America, even though sickle cell affects 100,000 people outside of the US, we're looking at over 7 million people living with this. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that,
there's not enough education about that.
Not enough education, not enough awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, because these purported misinformation just keep making their rounds on social media, making their rounds online, it's limiting how much research funding sickle cell disease is able to secure. And I think, we're not only talking about this from a research point of view, we're also talking about this from a newborn screening point of view. Recently, the HHS completely shut down with the change in administration newborn screening. And that's something that our community, we need.
Of course.
More, and we need to know when babies are born, we need to equip families with the tools to say, we recognize your child has been diagnosed with this disease, but it is not a death sentence. You have people that are living to their 70s and their 80s, and they're thriving with this disease if it's managed properly. We need to continue to provide those services to families. And so my hope is that we continue on in this work and that we get the research funding that we need so that globally we can address these issues when it comes to health equity and access for patients all around.
Speaking of health equity, that was my next question, because you both talked about this, but sickle cell disease, while not exclusively, I've learned, disproportionately affects Black communities. And what role does health equity play in access to gene therapy or other treatments?
Health equity plays a big role. Even prior to gene therapy, there was not even enough access to care for even something like penicillin for babies with sickle cell disease. The warriors who are listening knows that penicillin will help guard from infections. And then there's a drug that has been around since, the 90s that was not created for sickle cell warriors. It was created for people who have cancer, and it's called hydroxyurea. That drug has now, I think now is the only drug on the market for people with sickle cell disease.
Really?
There were other, there's the curative therapies, and then there's the disease modifying drugs. So there were I want to say 2019. So you're talking about the 1990s, and then 2019, finally we're seeing disease modifying drugs on the market. And since then, those disease modifying drugs they're now off the market. So now we're back to the original hydroxyurea. I think there's great pharma companies right now that are still looking into modifying and creating more disease modifying drugs. But just that alone, we have cystic fibrosis, and we have all of these other disease, hemophilia, and money, millions, billions of dollars is being pumped into those disease areas. But because sickle cell is a Black disease,
it's not.
We're not getting the same funding or recognition.
So
I'm sorry to hear that. I'm
so
really
sorry to hear that. But what should healthcare providers keep in mind when talking to patients about SCD and gene therapy? Is there something with all of this data and information that we can all put together for the future? And can healthcare providers behave differently?
I think healthcare providers can start by collaboration. No one knows everything. That's just a fact. human being on this world knows everything. And I think sometimes doctors come to patients with this outlook of, I have to know it all. You don't.
Right.
First before you're a provider. And I think if they came to the table saying, you are the one that is living life and walking in these shoes every day, teach me what you are doing so I can best provide compassionate, respectful care, but also come from a place of collaboration with patients, then we would be far along. Sometimes the lab coat gives this sense of power that providers tend to have without realizing that, like, when talking about healthcare, the patient is the nucleus of the healthcare ecosystem. Without patients, there are no drugs. Without patients, there are no pharmaceutical companies. Without patients, there are no medical equipment that are used. Like, we are this center. And I think opinions and beliefs need to shift in terms of how we work around the patient so that way it feels more like you're giving patients an equitable seat at the table. One of our colleagues in this space, Dr. Bailey, always says, don't create things for us without us.
Wow.
That is so well said.
Valuable.
That patients have to be part of the treatment. It's a very valuable statement. Now, both of you sadly have this horrible disease. Talk to a listener who's just been diagnosed and is feeling overwhelmed and isolated. What words can you share with them? Help them right now, if you would.
So a sickle cell patient usually presents if they're newly diagnosed, they present symptoms around 6 months. So really, I would talk to the parent of that
I
child.
see.
What I would say is, right now, as much as we talked about lack of health equity, lack of medication, and right now is a wonderful time to have sickle cell because there's new emerging medicines coming. There's
Yes.
stem cell research coming. There's CRISPR. And even beyond that, your baby is still a jewel, and life does not end with the diagnosis of sickle cell disease.
So that's a beautiful statement.
That's a beautiful.
Very
Absolutely.
uplifting and positive. And that goes to all our listeners who are dealing with a rare disease and parents of children with a rare disease where their so-called perfect baby isn't perfect, but there's no such thing as perfect, is there? We're each unique and special and glorious. And so every baby is a treasure. So I take those words. I'm a proud grandma, so I'm the eldest in the group here. So I can tell you there's no joy greater than a little baby. Now, if I can ask you, you're both so eloquent. What made you decide to start your podcast?
So I will say this, sickle cell is the foundation on which I have built my perfectly imperfect life. She is my superpower. I wouldn't be as empathetic and compassionate as I am today without sickle cell disease. So I've chosen to see disease from that aspect. And with that in mind, this podcast is really a love letter to the sickle cell community. Oftentimes,
that's beautiful.
Educational materials for us. They're doing all of these things and they're not including us. Well, here's a podcast that was developed for us by us. And I think for me, there's no better way to educate my community than to have a conversation, because I'm very cognizant of the fact that not everyone is a science buff. Not everyone loves to talk about healthcare, and that's okay. But there are people like Dima and myself who can break down that medical information and simplify it so that it feels conversational, because I think when healing begins with understanding. If you don't understand the nuances and complexities of the chronic illness and the disease you're living with, it's very hard to get to a place of feeling healed, because you almost feel like the disease is it's like a tsunami. It's engulfing every aspect of your life. But I think when you understand, these are my triggers, this is what I need to do to stay out of the hospital, I think it makes for a better human to be able to truly thrive. And so for us, this podcast was really born from a place of, guys, we're talking about gene therapy. It's a lot of heavy facts. Patient population, especially with this younger generation with a shorter attention span. we need to use all types of media to
Yes.
communicate with this
Yes,
patient
we do.
population.
Absolutely. What a beautiful, beautiful perspective. It must have taken you your whole life to really gather up the wisdom to develop this perspective and then to come down to this podcast. Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you both for being so open about your experiences and all the work you've done to provide a welcoming and an educational space for the sickle cell community. Everyone, be sure to check out season 2 of the podcast Through the Genes, launching on World Sickle Cell Day, June 19th, 2025. And again, thank you both for being guests on It Happened to Me today.
Thank you for listening to this episode of It Happened to Me. We encourage you to learn more at ithappenedtomepod.com. Please use the contact form on our website to submit your guest suggestions, comments, questions, ideas, and feedback for the show. You can also email us directly at ithappenedtomepod@gmail.com. We would really appreciate it if you can leave us a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app like Apple or Spotify. This helps others in the rare disease and medical challenge community find us. It Happened to Me is created and hosted by Kathy Gillenhorn and Beth Glassman. I'm Keir Deneen from DNA Today, and I serve as our executive producer and marketing lead. Amanda Andrioli is our associate producer. Ashlyn Anokian is our graphic designer. And remember, it happened to me. I'm not alone, and neither are you.